Okay, so today we're going to be solving quadratic equations by factoring. So we just went over how to factor, and now we're going to be using that to solve a quadratic equation. So first thing I want to talk about what a quadratic equation is. When you have a quadratic equation, you have an x squared in your equation. So the standard form for that is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so that's the order that it needs to be in order to factor it. Okay, now might be sometimes whenever the x term is missing or a constant's missing, but that's the form that it needs to be in. Okay, so the first step will be to set each equation equal to 0. So if you look at number 1, notice that it's not equal to 0. Now remember when we were factoring, we wanted a, which was the coefficient of x squared. We always want that first term to be positive, so make sure you're looking at that before you start moving things to one side to set it equal to 0. So notice on number 1, x squared is positive. We want to keep it that way. So that means I'm going to subtract x and subtract 30 on both sides of the equation. So those cancel. So we have x squared minus x minus 30 now equals 0. Okay, so once we get the equation equal to 0, then we're going to factor completely. So remember, when we factor, the first thing that we check for is GCF. So see if they have anything in common. So notice they do not have anything in common. So then we're going to look at, see how many terms we have. We have 3 terms. So remember, on 3 terms, you want to add to the middle number, which is -1, multiplied to your outside numbers, which would be -30. Okay, so the two numbers would be -6 and +5. So when I factor that, that would be x minus 6 and x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, so I factored it. Now, once you have factored, notice this last step up at the top. You're going to set each factor equal to 0, and you're going to solve for x. So I have 2 different factors. I have x minus 6, and I have x plus 5. So I'm going to have x minus 6 equals 0, and then I'm going to have x plus 5 equals 0. So when I solve for x, x would equal 6. And then this next one, x would equal -5. Okay, so once you factor, you're setting each factor equal to 0 to find what x equals. So your solution would be x equals 6 or -5. To check your solution, you can plug it back into your original equation, and it should be true. Okay, so now let's take a look at number 2. All right, so remember your first step is to set it equal to 0. So look at your x squared term. Notice that it's a +3 x squared, so we want to keep it positive, which means we would want to subtract 10x on both sides of your equation. Make sure you put it in standard form of a quadratic, so x squared needs to come first. Then your x term, so minus 10x. Then your constant, which is just your number, so -8. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to see if we can factor. So first thing we check for is GCF. Notice they do not have anything in common. So remember, on 3 terms, we're going to add to the middle number, which is -10, multiply to your outside numbers, which would be -24. Okay, so since we're multiplying to get a negative, adding to get a negative, only one term will be negative. So that would be -12 times a +2. So we would have x minus 12, x plus 2 equals 0. Now, notice the number in front of x squared is a 3. which means we're not finished factoring, because remember we have to take that coefficient and divide it by each one here in order to factor. And we'll use the swing method. Before we can use the swing method, then we will reduce. So that would be x minus 4. Notice we cannot reduce 2/3, so I'll take the 3 and I'll swing it in front. So that would be 3x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so since we're done with factoring now, we're going to set each factor equal to 0 to solve. So x minus 4 equals 0. And 3x plus 2 equals 0. So this first one, x would equal 4, because you would just add 4 to both sides. 4 minus 4 gives you 0. And then the other one, you might not be able to determine what that is, so subtract 2. So just show your work. 3x equals negative 2. Divide by 3, and so x would be a negative 2/3. So your two solutions would be x equals 4 and negative 2/3. Okay, to check it, you would plug those back into your original equation and it should be true. Okay, let's look at 3. Notice on 3 that it's already set equal to 0, so we don't have to do that first step. So we're moving on to the second step, which is factoring. So remember, the first thing you check for is GCF. Notice both of them have an x in common, so that's what we're going to take out first. Remember, we're dividing each one by the GCF, which is x. So I'll be left with x minus 2 equals 0. So now notice that we're looking inside the parentheses. We're not going to be able to factor x minus 2. So we're done with factoring. Now we're setting each one equal to 0. Notice this one here is just an x. So x equals 0. And setting this one equal to 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So x would equal positive 2. So there's my two solutions, x equals 0 or 2. Okay. If you end up with just an x, you know that your solution on that part will be x equals 0. So you're just setting it equal to 0 there. Okay, so now let's look at this last example. Okay, so remember the first step is to set it equal to 0. Remember, we talked about when you're dealing with factoring, we want the first term, which is your x squared term, we want that coefficient to be positive. So let's look at our x squared. Notice that's a positive 2x squared. So we don't want to subtract it over because then it will become negative. We want that first term to be positive of our quadratic equation. Okay, so that means I'm going to subtract 8x and subtract 24 on both sides. So now that equals 0. Writing it in standard form, 2x squared first minus 8x minus 24. Okay, so then I'm going to look at my quadratic equation. First thing we look for when we're factoring is a GCF. Notice they all have a 2 in common, so we'll take that out first. So you have x squared minus 4x minus 12. So once we take out our GCF, we're looking to see if we have, looking to see how many terms we have. So looking inside, we have 3 terms, so we want to add to negative 4, multiply to negative 12. Because notice in front of x squared, that's a 1 there. Okay, so then we're going to figure out what adds to negative 4, multiplies to negative 12. So that would be negative 6, positive 2. So we have 0 equals, bring down your GCF. That would be x minus 6, x plus 2. And then notice since this is a 1 here, we don't have to use the swing method like we did on the other example that we were using the swing method on. Okay, so once we've done that, we're setting each factor equal to 0. Now notice this 2 here, if we set that equal to 0, that's not going to help us solve for x because there's not an x in it. So we're only going to set x minus 6 and x plus 2 equal to 0. So x would equal 6 and x would equal negative 2. And then again, to check it, we could plug in 6 for x, negative 2 in for x, and it should be a true statement when you plug it back into your original quadratic equation.